Night had fallen completely, and the borderlands of planet Arden, already sparsely inhabited, sank into a deeper stillness, leaving only the cold wind circling fields of silver grass that swayed beneath a dim moon. Joren Vale parked his rusted hovercraft at the edge of the yard, his gaze lingering on a faraway cloud of dust that hadn't settled after a day of hard labor. He lived alone on this patch of land, an old wooden house, a grain barn, a horse shed, a stretch of plain running to the very edge of the red forest, all of it forming a quiet fortress in the vast expanse, where the past could be swept away by the wind and sorrows when unspoken. Tonight everything should have ended with a hasty dinner, a bland drink, and an old news broadcast on a low-frequency radio. But Joren heard it, a sound he couldn't mistake. The tiny engine's hum, the whisper of drone wings skimming the ground, and then a strangled scream tearing through the distant darkness. He stopped breathing, his old instincts surging. Instantly, he grabbed a flashlight and his plasma hunting rifle and rushed out the back, moving along the glinting fence posts. Under the moonlight, Joren saw a figure running madly across the field of silver grass, clutching a small shape, with a red gleam behind them like the eyes of a predator. Scout drones, surely those of the hunters. "This way," he shouted decisively, sweeping his flashlight in their direction. The figure froze for a moment, hesitated, then dashed toward the light without a hint of fear. In that brief instant, Joren saw her clearly. A woman, her skin shimmering with an unfamiliar violet hue in the beam, her dark hair soaked by rain, and golden eyes blazing fiercely. In her arms, a girl around 5 or 6, her small face pale, clutching her mother's neck, eyes wide open and unmoving. Joren didn't think, he just acted. "To the barn," he signaled, slamming the heavy door shut just as the drone's wings hissed above the roof. Metal scraped wood, red beams swept through the cracks, searching for warmth, for signs of life. Joren pulled the strange woman and child behind a stack of feed bags, lowering their breathing. Cold sweat broke down his back even though it was barely above 7 degrees outside. The drones circled for several passes, then moved on, leaving behind only the pounding breaths and the frantic beating of hearts filling the silent air. Only then did Joren realize he was holding the stranger tight against his chest, the strange scent of alien skin, the damp warmth, and the faint heartbeat of the child pressed between them. The woman pulled away, her eyes never leaving him, arms still wrapped protectively around her daughter. "Are you hurt anywhere?" he whispered, his voice deepening, echoing the calm authority he once had in the rescue unit. She didn't answer, only shook her head slightly, violet lips pressed into a line. "Up to the loft. No windows, no one will see." Joren pointed upwards, gestured, and when the woman nodded, he helped her lift the child onto her back, climbed up first, and reached down to pull them both up after him. They hid in the loft, the light off, their breaths melting into the darkness. For the first time, Joren studied the woman's features. Angular face, long neck, sharp collarbones visible under torn fabric. Yet her eyes shone with a dangerous light, like a beast cornered but still holding its royal dignity. The little girl pressed against her mother, her gaze never wavering from him, purple lips tightly shut, a fresh scab on her arm just drying. The night dragged on endlessly. Only when the drones were truly gone did Joren dare leave the barn, telling the mother and child to stay hidden. He hurried to the main house, boiled water, fetched bandages, and some leftover food. When he returned, he saw them curled up in the loft, eyes wide and wary. Joren placed a cup of hot water and a plate of bread on the ladder. "You can stay here tonight. If the drones come back, they'll sweep the main road, not the barn." "My name's Joren." The woman just looked at him, her eyes measuring, like someone who'd heard too many lies to trust easily. The child said nothing, clutching her mother's shirt, eyes never leaving the food. After midnight, the rain turned heavy. Joren lay on an old armchair by the window, eyes closed but ears straining for every strange noise. The image of the alien woman haunted his thoughts, her pale violet skin, golden eyes burning in the dark, that raw, unyielding beauty. Sometimes, memories of other women in Joren's past flashed through his mind, but never before had he felt such a mix of danger and fragility, fear and allure. At dawn, Joren rose early. He brewed coffee, packed a few snacks, and found an old set of clothes, then brought them out to the barn. The mother and child were still in the loft. The girl had dozed off on her mother's shoulder. The woman sat against the wall, her eyes sunken but fiercely bright. When Joren placed the coffee and clothes on a wooden crate, she nodded gently. "Thank you, I'm Teyla Sarn, this is Oryn." Her voice was hoarse, like wind blowing through a mountain pass. Joren hid his surprise. "Nice names." Oryn shyly burrowed into her mother's shirt but still stole a glance at him, her eyes that strange purple, gleaming with a brightness beyond her years. In the pale light, Joren noticed Teyla's hand trembled slightly, a bloodstain spreading across her shirt. "You're hurt," he said, holding out a box of bandages and antiseptic. Teyla hesitated, then removed her outer jacket, revealing a wound on her hip, not too deep but bleeding for a while, the edges bruised, clear signs of days spent being hunted. "Let me help." He cleaned the wound and dressed it with swift, practiced hands. Every time his fingers brushed Teyla's skin, he felt a jolt of heat, a softness strange and cold, yet from within radiated a dormant vitality that awakened a primal hunger he couldn't suppress. She watched him, eyes both wary and curious as if testing him. When Oryn woke, Teyla leaned close and whispered something. The girl turned to Joren and spoke in a tiny, hesitant voice for the first time. "Are you real?" Joren chuckled, "More than real, hungry." Oryn nodded, ran to grab a piece of bread. Joren could feel the tension in the air had eased a little. Later, Joren invited them into the main house, not only to keep them safe from drones but to help them recover. He heated water for bathing, prepared a meal, and tried to keep everything as normal as possible. Even though the air was thick with caution, a fragile trust had started to form among them. During the meal, Teyla was sparing with words, but her eyes often lingered on Joren as if weighing what kind of man he was. One who only wanted a bit of affection, or one who'd risk everything to protect others. Joren tried not to stare, but every movement of Teyla's seemed to have a strange pull, especially when she toweled her hair, violet skin, glistening with water, delicate shoulders peeking out from the old shirt he'd given her. Near the end of the meal, Teyla finally spoke. "Why are you helping me? Do you know who I am?" Joren replied simply, "I don't care who you are, just that you and your daughter are being hunted. I don't like those who prey on women and children." Oryn looked up, her eyes filled with admiration. Teyla looked at him, her expression softening, a fleeting smile at the corner of her lips. "I heard people here would sell anything to survive. You're not like them." Joren just shrugged, saying nothing more, but something inside him had shifted. Later, he went up to the loft again to check on them, and by chance caught Teyla changing. Light from the doorway outlined her pale violet skin, the gentle curves, faint scars on her shoulder and back. She didn't rush to cover up, just shot him a sharp glance, at once wary and quietly provocative. Joren looked away, heart pounding, fighting for composure while desire crept in uncontrollably. At his age, he was used to loneliness and repressed longing, but Teyla was like a wound that refused to heal. Every time their eyes met, it reminded him he was still alive, still capable of wanting. Night fell. Joren sat outside the porch, lamplight flickering, listening to the rain. Inside, Oryn had fallen asleep on the sofa, while Teyla stood by the window, watching the darkness. Suddenly she stepped over, stopping close to him, so close he could smell her strange scent like wind and ash in her hair. "Aren't you afraid?" Teyla asked in a low, deep voice. "I am, but fear is something you face, not hide from." She lowered her head, her warm breath brushing his neck, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder, sliding down to his chest. Joren stood still, heart pounding, fully aware this was not a moment of weakness but a survival instinct, the urge to reach out for something real in a world full of danger. Teyla looked up at him, eyes lingering longer than necessary. In that brief moment, they almost became one, no longer separated by species, only the raw urge to find comfort amid chaos, through the endless night and storm outside. Neither said anything more. When Teyla left, only the warmth of her hand lingered on Joren's chest. He knew from that moment on he could no longer turn back. That night, for the first time in a long while, Joren slept without the lights on, without a gun beneath his pillow. In his dreams, he saw himself and Teyla running through the rain with Oryn, crossing nameless fields, with the red glare of Hellion Genex chasing them from behind, and ahead only a faint promise. There might be peace, but only if they dared risk everything. It was the first night of a new journey, where all instincts, fears, and desires were exposed, marking the beginning of a long stretch ahead, dangerous and burning on the border between love and survival. The space inside Joren's old house began to fill with unfamiliar sounds. The scent of food mixed with damp wood, the soft footsteps of Oryn moving quietly through the rooms, the slow breathing of Teyla Sarn in the dark, and the racing heartbeat of Joren every time their eyes met for a little too long. He had been alone for so long that he didn't realize he was being pulled into a strange vortex, cautious, yearning to be close, struggling to hide his fear beneath a calm exterior. Oryn quickly adapted to her new surroundings, her gaze curious, sometimes secretly watching Joren as if trying to judge whether he was truly a good man or just another passing soul who would betray them at any moment. But there was something about the girl that transcended her years, quiet, deep, and when no one was looking, she would sit and draw strange shapes on the walls. Drones, mechanical arms, the seal of Hellion Genex that Joren recognized only from his time scavenging in forbidden scrap yards. The silence stretched taut like a spring. Joren tried to keep everything normal, fixing the fence, tidying the barn, sometimes teaching Oryn how to trap small animals or mix food for the livestock. But he knew just one unusual sound and everything could shatter. Teyla never truly slept deeply. Sometimes, Joren would wake from a dream to find her standing at the window, her eyes cold and sharp as a wild animal, sometimes glimmering with a loneliness so profound it hurt to look at. They said nothing, only quietly watched each other, but the air was always thick with attention, like a bowstring forever drawn but never loosed. Once, Joren found Teyla examining her wound, cutting it open herself to make sure nothing had been left beneath her skin. He came closer, holding out a box of antiseptic. "Let me." She looked up at him, her eyes a mix of suspicion and indifference, then gently turned her hip toward him, her shirt raised higher than necessary. His hand trembled as it touched her cold, alien skin, the purple blood spreading around the old stitches. Teyla said nothing, only breathed deeply as he cleaned the wound, her eyes silent as a lake. "Are you used to hurting yourself?" She answered quietly, "Better me than anyone else." Joren couldn't muster a smile, only feeling every pulse in his wrist, every breath she took, every taut muscle beneath his touch. When Teyla lowered her shirt, his hand lingered on her hip a beat too long, and for the first time she didn't pull away. Instead, she stayed, her lips trembling as if wanting to say something but holding back. The air between them gradually shifted. No longer rescuer and rescued, but two lost souls forced to rely on each other to survive. In those rare moments when Oryn slept soundly, Joren and Teyla began to talk, at first only cautious questions. "Who are you running from?" "Hellion Genex. They're not a government but a corporation that hunts rare genetics. I was one of their prime specimens, but I refused to breed for them. My ex-husband betrayed me." Joren fell silent, seeing in her eyes a pain that had hardened into anger, contempt, and self-loathing. Oryn, too, slowly opened up to Joren, with little questions about his old life, about the stars she had never seen outside, about why a man would choose to live alone on such a desolate frontier. Joren smiled gently, "Maybe because it's quiet here, but ever since you two arrived, I feel more alive than I have in years." Once, while tidying the barn, Joren found Oryn curled in a dark corner, clutching a small knife, her eyes wide with fear. He knelt beside her, speaking softly, "What's there to be afraid of, little one?" Oryn said nothing, but when Joren held out his hand, she slowly set the knife down, her eyes suddenly shining with trust. "I just don't want Mom to leave me," she whispered. Joren gathered Oryn in his arms, gently rubbing her back, as naturally as if he'd been a father his whole life. The house gradually became crowded with feelings unspoken. Teyla watched Joren playing with Oryn, saw the gentle smile flicker on his lips, the glimmer in his eyes, something she thought no longer existed in humans, genuine kindness. And it was in moments like these that desire began to awaken, not a base instinct, but the thirst of survivors clinging to warmth in a cold world. One evening, after Oryn had fallen asleep, Joren and Teyla sat side by side on the porch, just a breath apart. No one broke the silence, but their eyes spoke for them. Every pain, every escape, every instinct to live, to love, all concentrated into that single moment. Joren tilted his head, his gaze lingering on the curve of Teyla's neck, her violet skin streaked with scars, glittering softly in the lamplight. "Teyla." She didn't answer, only looked at him for a long time, then reached up and touched his neck, pulling him close. Their breaths mingled, body heat rising, the world shrinking to nothing but the beating of their hearts. The first kiss was gentle but fierce, no longer hesitant or guarded, just the desperate need to live, to touch something real. Teyla trembled in Joren's arms, but it was she who guided his hand down to her waist, her back, her thighs, leading him with every movement. Clothes fell quickly to the floor, human and alien skin entwined, burning hot and icy cold at once. Teyla pressed her chest to his, breathing rapidly, her strong hands wrapping around Joren's neck, pulling him closer. There was no hesitation of a first time, only primal longing and the drive to survive, to truly be herself. Joren felt every quiver in Teyla. She was strong and fragile, in control and yet surrendering. They melted into each other as if separation would mean the end of everything. When it was over, Teyla rested her head on his chest, sweat mingling between them, their breath slowing. They said nothing, only held each other for a long, long time. Joren brushed her cheek lightly, whispering, "You're not a specimen, not a tool, and definitely not a prize for anyone else. Here, you're just you." Teyla smiled softly, her eyes finally letting her vulnerability show. "I don't know how long I can stay myself, but if I have to run, if I have to fight, I want you with me. Only you." From that night on, the air in the house was different. Every touch, every look, every word became heavier, deeper, thick with the fear of being torn apart at any moment. Yet at the same time, every embrace, every night spent entwined, felt as if the world outside no longer mattered, only their two bodies, two souls clinging to each other in the storm. Oryn changed too. She laughed more, clung to both Joren and Teyla, drew new pictures of the three of them. Always a small family, by the fire in the silver fields with no drones, no trace of Hellion Genex. But peace never lasts forever. Once, while Joren was sorting old weapons in the shed, Oryn rushed in, her face pale. Mom said she heard something strange out in the fields. Joren gripped his plasma rifle tightly, his eyes scanning every dark corner of the yard, his heart pounding faster. Teyla was already waiting at the door, weapon ready, her eyes cold and sharp as a true warrior. For the first time since meeting, the three of them stood back to back, ready to defend. No longer lost souls, but a new family standing together against the storm. Outside, a strange sound rose, the whir of drones, the crunch of boots on gravel, the presence of those who never give up. No one spoke, but Joren and Teyla's eyes met once more. Not with fear, but with certainty. If they had to fight, they'd fight together. If they had to die, they'd die for each other. And in that moment, Joren knew his life had turned a page, where love was no longer a luxury, but the only weapon left to hold back the world. Inside the small house on the edge of the fields, Joren felt the air thick and heavy, as if every sense were coated with iron dust, oppressive and always on the verge of exploding, like a tightly coiled spring. There was no more illusion of peace. Ever since Oryn heard the drone, Joren kept a weapon with him at all times. His conversations with Teyla grew more frequent, always about escape plans, secret routes, and where to send Oryn if things spiraled out of control. Beneath the mask of normalcy, each of them nursed their own private fears. Joren wondered if he truly had what it took to protect both Teyla and her daughter. In Teyla's eyes, there were moments when uncertainty flickered, a fear that, no matter how strong she was, she could lose everything in a single moment of carelessness. Oryn was growing sharper by the day, her ability to learn and remember far beyond her age. Sometimes, after only a single glance, she could redraw the schematics of a drone, a cloaking device, or a heliogenics code. But that very intelligence was what made Teyla even more afraid. Would her daughter become just another tool for others, like she herself once was? One night, when everything was at its quietest, Joren was suddenly awakened by a flash of light on the edge of the fields. He sat up, heart pounding, his arm automatically reaching for the plasma rifle. Teyla was already at the door, her eyes sharp as steel, and Oryn was hidden securely in a secret compartment beneath the floor, a hiding place Teyla had discovered soon after arriving. Outside, scanning lights swept across, more than one, newer drones, more advanced, moving silently, almost soundless. Joren gritted his teeth, recalling his days hunting criminals, knowing well that this kind of deadly silence was the signature of a professional kill team. In the darkness, Teyla pulled him close, whispering right into his ear, her breath hot and urgent. "These drones are built to detect biosignatures. They have my sample or Oryn-S. They won't stop. Unless we deal with the source, they'll keep coming back." Joren looked at her, seeing both determination and despair in her eyes, a hunger not only to survive but to seize control. "Have you dealt with these before?" "Yes," Teyla replied, a bitter smile on her lips. "The only way is to make them lose the trail completely or take out their handler." He didn't ask further, but he knew from then on, every choice would be paid for in blood. The two worked together like machines programmed in perfect sync. Teyla guided Joren to place jamming devices, lay electric traps along the fence posts, and check every lock and hatch. He was surprised to see Oryn, so small and quiet, methodically checking backup power supplies, connecting signal wires, her eyes focused and coldly calm. In only a few days, Oryn had grown up so much, no longer afraid at the sound of gunfire, no longer crying even when she saw her mother's blood. When all was ready, Joren and Teyla returned to the living room, the faint yellow light making the scars on her skin stand out even more. No one spoke of what was about to happen, but the tension in the air was like a razor, sharp, deadly. A single touch would be enough to draw blood. Suddenly, Joren pulled Teyla close, holding her tight, his mouth tracing a line down her neck, to her chest, his hand moving along her cold spine before gripping her waist with a possessiveness that brooked no resistance. Teyla didn't resist. On the contrary, she wrapped her arms around his neck, her mouth seeking his, this kiss deeper, more urgent. No longer gentle, but a hunger for life. A desperate need to belong to someone, even if only for a brief moment before the storm. Their bodies tangled on the cold wooden floor, sweat mingling, emotions swirling between pleasure and despair. Joren could feel every contraction in Teyla, her soft, deep moans rising from the depths of her soul, as if every embrace, every kiss was a fierce declaration that they were still alive, not yet swallowed by fate. When it was over, Teyla rested her head on his chest, her hand lightly stroking the old scar along his ribs. "If I have to die, I want to die like this in your arms," she whispered. Joren didn't answer, only held her tighter as if he could keep her forever. A slight tremor shook the house, the sound of a drone or worse, ground troops approaching. Teyla stood up, dressed again, her eyes regaining their coldness. Joren pulled her back, pressing a long kiss to her forehead. We'll survive. For Oryn, for you, for everything you've ever lost." Teyla looked at him, her eyes shining with both hope and fear. Outside, the drones swept around the house, the electric traps flickering like tiny bolts of lightning. Heavy footsteps echoed. A strange voice rang out, not the local dialect, but the low, grim tone of Heliongenix mercenaries. Joren glanced at Teyla. "What are they saying?" She smirked. "They said the house is surrounded. We have 2 minutes to surrender or they'll take Oryn." Joren gripped his plasma rifle tightly, murmuring, "If they come in, don't wait for a signal." Teyla nodded, her eyes gleaming sharp as blades. The gunfight erupted in an instant. The electric traps worked immediately. A drone exploded into a flash of blue light. But the Heliongenix troops weren't amateurs. They split into teams, moving with strategy, not rushing. A shadow crept to the window, but before he could leap in, he took a plasma shot from Joren and collapsed with a hoarse scream. Teyla darted out to the porch, her alien gun firing purple beams that sliced through enemy armor, her eyes becoming those of the warrior queen she once was. Every movement was decisive, no wasted energy. Joren covered Teyla from behind, shooting while retreating toward the hatch. He knew that no matter how brave, they could only hold out for so long. Oryn was still hiding below, but Joren worried that even one mistake would spell the end. An enemy soldier moved too quickly, tossing a grenade near the door. Joren lunged to shield Teyla, his chest burning from the shockwave, but he stayed standing. He hurled a homemade grenade back, hearing a scream outside, knowing at least one more had been taken out. Suddenly from behind, a strange noise sounded from the hatch. The electric signal was disrupted, the hatch door forced open from within. Joren raced over, fear flaring in his eyes. Where was Oryn? She had slipped outside, ghost-like, circling to the back of the house. In her hands was the signal jammer, her face utterly unafraid. Joren paused, astonished. "Oryn, what are you doing here?" The girl looked up, her voice firm. "The lock system was hacked. If we don't break the signal, the drones will call for reinforcements. I can do it, trust me." There was no time to argue. Joren helped Oryn connect the wires, never taking his eyes off the far window. Outside, Teyla was still firing, purple shots splitting the night, enemies falling but more coming up behind. Oryn worked with breathtaking speed. Under her small hands, the jammer activated, and the drones immediately lost their command signal, scattering aimlessly. Joren hugged Oryn tight, whispering, "Well done, my girl." The gunfire faded, leaving only the ragged breathing of Teyla and Joren. Outside, the survivors withdrew in haste, trailing blood across the ground. Teyla walked slowly into the house, her shirt torn to shreds, sweat pouring, blood on her arm, but her eyes ablaze with pride. Oryn rushed to hug her mother, tears streaming from emotion. Teyla knelt down, clutching her daughter, hands trembling. "You did so well, Oryn, you're everything to me." Joren stood beside them, his heart swelling with unspeakable gratitude and pride. He wrapped his arms around the two of them, for the first time not feeling like an outsider in this family. After the battle, the three of them sat together, gently tending each other's wounds, sharing long embraces. That night, once Oryn was asleep, Joren and Teyla curled up together on the old mattress, nothing stopping the burning hunger between them, their bodies and souls merging, tested by fire and now forged unbreakable. In their silent movements, Joren and Teyla didn't just find life, they forged an unspoken vow. Whatever happened, they would never abandon one another. They would fight for this family, with blood, with trust, with all the love, desire, and craving for freedom left in their hearts. And somewhere out there, in the sky streaked with the cold lights of drones, the eyes of Heliongenix still watched. But now, within this small house, among 3 hunted souls, something had been born that no organization could ever destroy. Absolute trust, love proven by fire, and the right to choose freedom for themselves. The silence after the battle was always the most terrifying thing. The house on the Arden lowlands now felt like a makeshift fortress, patched together and steeped in the aftermath of violence. Drone fragments, dried blood stains on the threshold, fresh cracks on the wooden walls. The sense of safety was only temporary, and all three of them knew it. Joren checked every device, trying to keep a calm demeanor, but deep down was a fear he couldn't shake. Hellion Genex would never let this go. They had lost not just men and machines, but had been humiliated by letting their specimen slip through their net. When Joren saw Teyla quietly cleaning up blood, crouched down fixing the door with calm eyes, he realized it was her composure and her scars that made him both want to protect her and merge with her. Consequences be damned. That evening, Oryn sat by the window, sketching with a sharp, almost frightening precision. Her drawings were not just of drones and soldiers, but also of strange symbols, genetic spirals, formulas, codes. Joren recognized these signs from secret Genex documents he'd once stolen from old data vaults in his mercenary days. He asked softly, "Oryn, who taught you these things?" She didn't look up, only replied quietly, "I remember them. There's always a voice whispering in my head. When I look at machines, everything appears like a puzzle. Mom told me not to tell anyone." Teyla sat nearby, her shoulder trembling ever so slightly. Joren knew she had heard. Later, after Oryn had gone to sleep, Joren pulled Teyla closer to the fireplace, the flames flickering over her pale violet, weary face. "Did Genex experiment on her?" She didn't avert her gaze, only began to speak slowly. "Oryn is the sole result of a whole generation of hybridization. They wanted to create a generation that could shatter every biological limit, combining the strongest genes and special abilities, the power to reprogram machines, sense signals, recall genetic memory. But when she was born, I saw something in her eyes, not the light of a machine, but the soul of someone free. I stole her, ran away from Genex, gave up my honor and my past, so Oryn wouldn't be turned into living merchandise." Joren gripped Teyla's shoulders, feeling a surge of rage and sorrow. "You're not a criminal, you're her mother, you're everything." Teyla rested her head on his chest, her hand clutching his shirt, tears trickling out without a sound. "I used to think I was just a tool, livestock, an experiment, but since meeting you, I know what it means to touch freedom, to be a woman, a real woman." Teyla's whisper was like a cool stream running down Joren's back, igniting in him a fierce desire. Not only to hold her, but to melt away all her pain, every scar and haunting memory left in her body and soul. He kissed her for a long time, letting the firelight play across every line on her skin, his hand trailing down her gentle back, his lips caressing her collarbone, her old scars, every kiss like an indelible mark of belonging. Teyla surrendered herself in Joren's arms, her hands searching his body. No more hesitation, no more defenses, just the burning instinct of a woman longing to be loved, to dissolve, to be called by name in delirium. In that room full of battle scars, they made love as if it were the only way to drive out the darkness. Their choked moans, the mix of pain and pleasure, of anger and forgiveness, of desire and love, all blended into one, making them forget the cold eyes still watching from outside. Afterwards spent in each other, Teyla whispered, "I just want to choose for once who I'm with, not because of Genex's orders, not because of species, not because of anyone's plans. Here with you I'm free." Joren kissed her forehead, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I don't care what you are or who you once were. All I know is that being with you is everything. I'll protect you and Oryn no matter what it costs." That fragile peace lasted only a moment before a new test arrived. That night, Oryn thrashed in her sleep, crying out, "He's coming, he's found you, Mom." Teyla held her daughter, her shoulders soaked in tears, her golden eyes shadowed with something unnameable. And as Oryn had predicted, barely half a day later, a convoy of unfamiliar vehicles appeared at the edge of the fields, not the colors of ordinary mercenaries, but the black-silver armor of Hellion Genex special forces. In the center, a tall figure stepped out, moving with chilling composure. Sevik Or, Teyla's ex-husband and Gen X's head of genetic development. Joren and Teyla stood together at the front door, weapons ready. Oryn hid behind them, eyes never leaving Sevic's silhouette. He sneered, his voice echoing, smooth and cold. "Teyla Sarn, it's been a while. Do you know the value of you, and your daughter has increased tenfold since you left Gen X? Come back, I'll spare that man's life and the girl, S2 if you cooperate." Teyla lifted her chin, eyes blazing. "I'd rather die free than live as a slave." Sevic's lips curled, his eyes crazed from too much power. "You think this human can protect you? A little emotion won't save you from your fate, Teyla. Oryn belongs to Gen X. She's the masterpiece of our entire kind." Joren aimed his gun square at Sevic, his voice low and steady. "Get off my land, or today will be the last day you breathe." Sevic flicked his hand and a squad of soldiers advanced, high-tech weapons aimed at the three of them. But at that moment, Oryn suddenly stepped forward, her face pale, eyes holding a universe of memories. "I'm no one's masterpiece. My mother is mine, and I belong only to her, to this family." At the same time, Oryn's small hand held an upgraded signal jammer, her finger pressing the trigger. A powerful energy field burst forth, freezing Gen X's weapon systems for several precious seconds. Teyla and Joren moved as one, predators on the attack, taking down 3 soldiers and using their own weapons to finish 2 more. Oryn ran behind the enemy line, plugging her device into the command vehicle's data port. A flood of red warnings, the Gen X control system going dark, even if only for a moment. Sevic roared in fury, aiming his energy gun at Oryn, but Teyla leapt to shield her daughter, taking a shot through the side. Purple blood spurted as she collapsed, still clutching Oryn, protecting her with every last bit of strength. Joren charged, firing back, his plasma round tearing into Sevic's shoulder, making him stagger, his face twisted in pain. In the chaos, Joren dragged Teyla and Oryn back inside, locking the door, activating the last line of defense. Blood still trickled from Teyla's wound, but her eyes had never shone so brightly. "Don't cry, Oryn. I'm alive because of you. Never let anyone, not even me, make you believe you're someone's property." Joren gripped Teyla's bloody hand, his lips trembling. "You won't die. We'll kill them all, then run, or die together, but I'll never leave you alone here." Gunfire, explosions, and the screams of predators echoed across the fields. The small family huddled inside their battered fortress, bracing for the final onslaught. And at that edge of despair, Joren felt, clearer than ever, life, love, longing, all forged together into an unbreakable bond. Outside, Sevic was still alive, and promised to return, with the wrath of the entire Gen X corporation behind him. But inside, the 3 hunted souls had become a true family. Wounded, bound together, free, and ready to cross any line just to keep each other from vanishing into the dark. Outside, the house had become a real battlefield. The tall grass was trampled, streaked with blood and scorched metal, drone fragments lying scattered across the fields, fire scars everywhere. There was no way back. Every safety line had been broken, every gunshot a reminder that life was measured by each breath, each squeeze of the trigger, every explosion that shook the air. Joren moved along the walls, his eyes never leaving the old monitor as Oryn hacked directly into the Hellion Gen X control system. Streams of data flashed beneath her small fingers, her gaze no longer that of a frightened child but the cold focus of a true prodigy, shaped by both genetics and the will to survive. Teyla, even after being shot, pressed on. Beneath her blood-stained shirt, the wound did nothing to quench her fighting spirit. She bandaged herself, her eyes burning bright, shoulders quivering with pain but her voice still sharp as steel. "Joren, you're not allowed to die before me. Oryn, you have to finish the decoding, or we won't have any hope of living." Joren nodded, squeezing Teyla's hand tightly, passing her all his resolve, love, and the primal instinct to protect to the very end. Outside, Sevic ordered his troops to use disruptor devices, the walls shaking with every wave. Joren pushed Teyla and Oryn down into the cellar, then rushed up, weapon in hand, like a beast driven into its last corner. He dropped 2 soldiers with precise shots, their screams echoing, then dashed back to help Oryn lock down data ports and hack back the drone command signal. Teyla leaned against the wall, her pale violet face streaked with sweat and blood, but her eyes never left Joren's movements. In the depths of pain, she felt a fierce desire to live, and a burning urge to give herself to the man who stood with her against the world. Each time Joren came close to shield her, their breaths mingled, the scent of blood, dust, and sweat blending into a dizzying elixir of survival. More than once in the bursts of gunfire, they clung to each other, Teyla's lips fastening to Joren's, as if it might be the last time, their bodies colliding in a moment where pain and pleasure were one and the same. A massive explosion at the window signaled that Oryn had entered the fray himself. He strode through gunfire, wrapped in high-tech armor, eyes shining like a predator. He shouted, his voice booming, vibrating in the minds of all 3. "Teyla, I'm here to end this. Come back, or I'll turn this rat hole into a grave for you and your mutant child." Teyla gave a cold smile, her eyes flashing defiance. "If you take one more step, my daughter herself will drag you to hell." Oryn was unafraid, her small hand gripping the codebreaker switch, her eyes wide, locked on Sevic's. Sevic stepped into the main room, energy gun leveled at Oryn. "Drop your weapons, or I'll wipe her entire genome." Joren lunged between them, his plasma rifle pointed straight at Sevic's head. "If you shoot, no one's leaving here in one piece." Sevic sneered, but at that exact moment, Oryn triggered the signal disruptor. The entire Gen X command network collapsed, drones and mercenaries losing control, firing wildly, chaos erupting outside. Teyla forced herself up, charging Sevic, her eyes blazing like lightning. They faced each other, not as former lovers or betrayers, but as warriors carrying generations of blood debt. "Sevic, I've had enough. You'll never control anyone's fate again." He lunged, weapon raised, but Teyla snatched it away, closing in and driving a knife, pulled from her boot, the one thing she'd kept since her days on the run, deep into his gut. Sevic screamed, flailing, but Joren was there to block, pinning his arms, pressing his face to the ground until his breath was gone. The house sank into deadly silence, only ragged breathing, Oryn's sobs, and the drip of Teyla's blood breaking the hush. Joren lifted Teyla, urgently pulling her down to the cellar, Oryn following close. He used every bit of medical knowledge he had, stitching her wound with trembling hands, terrified, anxious, and in pain as he watched the woman he loved most hover on the edge. "Don't die, Mom," Oryn whispered, her small hands pressed to the wound, strange symbols glowing on her skin, a purple light spreading like a warm current. Teyla gave a faint smile, stroking her daughter's hair, lips finally parting in a rare, fulfilled grin. "I'm all right because here I have you, I have Joren, I am free now." Above them, the hunt was over. Gen X troops fled in panic. Drones crashed and scattered, all traces of Sevic erased from the world. Below, in the cellar, just the 3 of them, bare and breathing together, Joren holding Teyla and Oryn tightly, as if letting go would mean the end of everything. With no strength left to speak, Joren clung to Teyla, feeling her heartbeat slow, then strengthen again. Oryn curled into her mother's arms, her eyes shining with new hope. In the heat of breath and the scent of blood and sweat, Teyla's hand slid down, pulling Joren close, pressing his lips to her neck, whispering in a hoarse but fierce voice, "Make love to me, right here, before I have time to think twice about any of this." Joren didn't hesitate. In the darkness of the cellar, with trembling breaths and Oryn's quiet sobs fading into sleep, their bodies became one, no sense of time, no more fear. Only life, only love, and a silent vow. Whatever happened outside, they would always be this family, free and unbreakable. When dawn, or some new light, crept through the cellar hatch, the 3 still held each other, their bodies spent but eyes burning with hope. The battle was over. Fate had been taken into their own hands. Yet life and love, desire, instinct, was only beginning a completely new chapter. The first dawn after the great battle was unlike any morning before. The lowland where gunfire, blood, iron, and smoke had echoed was now strangely silent. Only the calls of unfamiliar birds and the first rays of ardent sun piercing through the ruined hatch. Joren awoke between two sources of warmth. Oryn curled up like a small cat by his side, and Teyla resting her head on his chest, her hand clinging to the scar on his shoulder as if afraid he might vanish at any moment. In the cellar, the air was thick with the sense of sweat, blood, dust, and raw life. They no longer hid themselves, bare, vulnerable, but radiant as wildflowers blooming on stone. When Joren gently brushed Teyla's hair, she stirred, golden eyes opening with a glimmer of both pain and pride. "We're alive." Teyla's voice was hoarse and soft as breath, yet within it was the strength of an entire lineage that had risen. Joren smiled, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "You are my freedom, my whole future." Oryn awoke, burrowed into her mother's chest, her small hand gripping Joren's, her eyes now freed from fear and full of hope, the look of a child who had finally found her true family. After a short rest, Joren helped Teyla up out of the cellar. Her steps were still unsteady, but her eyes burned brightly again. Outside, the ardent sky was awash with sunlight, the devastation from the night before still raw. Scorched drones, shattered armor, and bloodstains from Sevic ore and Gen X soldiers soaked into the earth as proof that this land had been reclaimed by blood and will. Day by day, the three of them worked together, clearing the wreckage, burying drone remains, replanting trampled grass, patching the walls, replacing broken window panes. Each night they slept together in the small room, hands touching, breaths mingling as if to reassure themselves that none of it was a dream. Oryn gradually became lively again, still fascinated by technology but also racing through the fields, listening to Joren tell stories of ancient humans, learning the songs of the wind and the rhythm of her mother's heart during the long, peaceful nights. Teyla recovered slowly, but her spirit grew stronger with each day. To Joren, the alien woman who had once only known how to fight and flee had truly become the mistress of her own life. When she made love to him, it was no longer out of fear of loss, but out of an instinctual need to love, to be touched, to claim him with every bite, every drop of sweat on skin. Their nights together were both fierce and gentle, Teyla's violet skin tangled with Joren's sun-darkened body, their limbs entwined as if they were born to find each other, to create something entirely new. Sometimes Oryn would wake in the middle of the night, sneak a peek at her parents, and then slip into Joren's embrace, making both him and Teyla laugh. A life, a love, and even desire filling the small, safe space that was worth more than any city. Then one day, Teyla sat on the porch, her hand resting on her belly, eyes thoughtful as she gazed toward the crimson horizon. Joren came behind her, wrapping his arms around her, his hand on her stomach, feeling a new heartbeat just beginning. "Are you sure?" Teyla nodded, lips curving in a mysterious smile. "Sian, I can feel it. This child belongs to no genetic program, no council, no political scheme. This one belongs only to me, to you, to us." Joren bent down, whispered in her ear, "I would give my life to protect our child, to protect you, to guard everything we've won back." Those 9 months passed with hardship and worry, but were also overflowing with happiness. Oryn eagerly prepared little gifts for her sibling. Joren handcrafted a wooden cradle, reinforced the security systems around the house, and Teyla taught Oryn genetic symbols, telling her stories of a distant homeland and the right to choose one's own fate. The day Sian was born was the same day a storm swept across Arden's fields. In the small house, Teyla battled each wave of pain, Joren always by her side, his strong hand clasping hers, eyes never leaving the body of the woman he loved. Oryn helped wipe her mother's sweat, murmuring ancient Sarn words, her eyes glowing with a strange energy, as if Sian was more than just a newborn but a symbol of a new beginning. After hours of agony, a newborn cry rang out. Joren held the tiny child, pale blue skin touched with his own sundark hue, wide golden eyes taking in the world, as if imprinting every face in memory. Teyla broke down in tears, hugging her child close, Oryn sitting beside her, small hand gently stroking her sibling's cheek. Joren whispered, "Welcome, Sion. You are proof of freedom, of love, of something no force can ever extinguish." In the months that followed, their small family finally lived. No more running, no more fear at every drone's pass, no more screams demanding blood or genetic compliance. Together they gardened, repaired their home, taught Oryn and Sion about both worlds, about courage, instinct, the choice to live free, and the value of loving and being loved. On bright moonlit nights, Joren and Teyla would wrap themselves around each other, breaths intertwined, desire never waning. They made love as if each time might be the last, memorizing every mark, every bite, every drop of sweat, so that no matter what happened outside, they had each other, belonged to each other in the deepest way. Sometimes Oryn would hold Sion, watch her parents, and beam, as if she understood that nothing was more precious than being born of free love, living between two people willing to risk everything for her. Each morning, as sunlight poured through the windows, Teyla would whisper to Joren, "Thank you for teaching me that freedom isn't about running away, but about choosing to love, to have children, to live every single moment." Joren would pull her close, kiss her forehead, then lift his eyes to Arden's boundless blue sky, his heart swelling with unbreakable faith. No matter how the world outside changed, no matter if the hunters returned, this family, this love, would always be their fortress, a flame that could never be extinguished. At the farthest edge of freedom, Joren, Teyla, Oryn, and Sion had found a light no one could steal. A home, a family, a life they had built with their own hands in the vast and dangerous universe.